Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversations. Thank you all for being here. We have a panel today, as you can see, and it's a little bit unique, but it's all going to tie into some really fun conversations. We will open it up to questions at the end. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get cracking. We'll start here with Thomas.
Good morning. Happy Veterans Day for any of the military members there. Start out with that. Tom Lockhart. I'm the Director of Engineering for the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, also the Senior Civilian up at Hill Air Force Base.
I'm Anise Brown. I actually come from Hill Air Force Base. I was the Chief of Corporate Transformation for the General there for quite a few years, and then I moved on to being the Executive Director at Catalyst Campus.
Robert DeVincent, you'll hear them call me Devo on occasion. That's just my work call sign there. So I'm the Chief Software Officer for the 309 Software Engineering Group, former Marine, and been transitioned straight from the Marine Corps over to the civil service side.
And I forget, when is the Marine Corps' birthday?
It was yesterday. It was great.
You guys love that birthday more than any other branch.
We absolutely do. Yeah, even though I'm out, we still have the text chains going. It's been great.
Very cool. Okay, so in the invite and the marketing, it was the largest modernization initiative in the DoD, and what that means for Utah, the Utah tech industry, but northern Utah, right? Largest modernization initiative. What does that mean?
Okay, well, so you jump right into a big program. We probably should kind of level set everybody. In northern Utah, aerospace and defense is one of the largest employers. And so Hill Air Force Base is 26,000 people. We have about a 5-to-1 ratio with our contractor support groups, and so over 100,000 people up there. Hill has been known for air logistics, so how do you actually maintain supply chain managed aircraft? But we also have another faction called Minuteman. It's a legacy platform, and it's been around since the 60s, so almost 60 years. We're in the process of modernizing that, and it's called, most people here in Utah are used to ground-based strategic deterrent, but now it's called Sentinel, and it's a $96 billion acquisition. So just a little small thing, and it's basically a modernization of the Minuteman.
Okay, anything to add?
Yeah, no, so Sentinels they're taking a really cool, unique approach to acquisition. So traditionally, historically, when we acquire new weapon systems in the government, what we'll do is we'll put a quote out to our big contractors. They'll come back with their bids. We'll pick whichever one is either lowest cost technically acceptable or whichever one hits the mark the most. But what will typically happen is they'll go through this massive acquisition, development, R&D. They'll deliver this weapon system. And then after it's delivered, it's on the government to figure out how to keep it going, in this case for 60 years, and keep it alive. And that becomes a challenge. That handoff between a contractor to the government has historically been a challenge. So in this digital era, Sentinel is trying to copy the way that industry is doing things. We're trying to implement things like microservices. We're trying to implement things like not only no longer just delivering it and it's done. It's continuous software development, continuous engineering, continuous R&D. And specifically with this weapon system, what's so exciting is we're taking an approach of the government now is going to own the technical baseline, which means that we're going to own all of the source code. We're going to own everything that is this weapon system, so that when it comes time to sustain it, we're not caught scrambling and figuring out what that means. We'll be able to take this weapon system, and we'll probably still have contractor involvement, but the bottom line is we're going to be incorporating modern software development practices, and this will actually be a sustainable weapon system. Might even be longer than 60 years at this rate. So we're trying to do it right, which is exciting.
75 years. Yeah. So, and just to elaborate on that, so he jump right into software, and Silicon Slopes is known kind of for its software, but it's model-based system engineering. So we're actually thinking about in a digital native format. So that's different than most of our acquisitions. We used to use paper products. So we'd throw a contract out there, somebody bid back, we get a piece of paper and we kind of sign it. Now we're actually sharing models between our industry and the government.
I do want to say that I'm really excited about this. I came from F-16 originally. To see the integration of small businesses and the ability to work together, work right next to each other, so removing barriers of entry and ensuring that you're efficient. I've never seen that originally in the DoD, and now I see it, and it's beautiful. And then on top of it, we have Ogden booming with all of this growth and all of these companies coming to be a part of it. Small businesses want to be a part of it, and I think that's the big transition too, is the DoD is identifying that there is capabilities out there that if we adopt them, we may thrive faster than our adversaries. So it's been really exciting to see, and I love your program.
Yeah, so what we're talking about, we don't have enough time, this would take years, but it's the military-industrial complex a little bit, right? Whether it's wartime or peacetime, it would be cool if this weapon system could shoot further, more accurate, longer, than we don't have to go and like throw grenades into this pillbox. Or it would be cool if this software updated automatically, if we didn't have to call L3 or Raytheon and say, what does this mean? Ultimately, it all boils down to being faster, better, and staying ideally 1 or 2 steps, well, at a minimum 1 or 2 steps ahead of adversaries, but ideally 10, 15 steps ahead, right? Because at the end of the day, there's actually lives and geopolitical implications to all of this. Lot of acronyms, a lot of processes, and ultimately a lot of money, right? Because if you want a weapons system, chances are you're going to have to hire experts and firms and companies to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So back to this acronym, we talk in acronyms, but it is going to be a team of teams, and it's going to have to take a lot of participation with the group in the room here. And I look throughout the state, so we say top of Utah, aerospace and defense. It's got to be more. It's got to be more than that. So we've gone up to Idaho Falls, Idaho National Laboratories. We're linked in with them. Utah State, Space Dynamics, so we're linked into them. We have a Utah Test and Training Range just as out west of us. We've got to play in that environment. We've got the Roy Innovation Center that's right up there by the museum. If you drive up there, the 5 new buildings surrounding the museum, brand new. And then you'll see a lot of construction along hill. But just come down here to Salt Lake, L3 Harris over there by the airport. We're going to have to talk to them. And even beyond that, coming in to Silicon Slopes, this software development. We're trying to change the way we think about software. It isn't the old waterfall, we're going to design and test the heck out of it. We got to be more modular and quick. And our chief says it very well, accelerate or lose. So if we don't get faster, we're going to lose. And we've got to stay ahead of our near peers.
And I do want to emphasize on that. I mean, when I was working at Hill Air Force Base, I think originally we really looked inside the base, and now we're looking outside. So we had Qualtrics, one of the largest data analytics companies here in Utah, and being able to work with them, identifying that they had a mechanism within their machine learning and artificial intelligence to identify suicides and how people filled out surveys. Like, those are the things we want to know about. Those are the things we want to integrate, and we don't need to do it from the ground up. So it's been nice coming to Silicon Slopes and interfacing with that. And that was actually done by Silicon Slopes, that introduction. So it really getting outside the base, identifying how we do business differently and how we become more efficient.
Yeah, so I'm just going to mention one thing that's been really exciting on that. So we've kind of hinted at, we in the DoD are absolutely trying to keep up at the speed of relevance. We have to. And to do that, historically, you hit the nail on the head, we've always kind of been this isolated environment entity inside of a base. We don't typically talk outside. We're now doing things with Silicon Slopes and with Catalyst Campus. Other way around. And what we're actually doing that's exciting is we're sending our civilian and in some cases military to go and pair with our industry experts or our small businesses. We're actually doing these great outreach exercises to where we're now able to not only learn but train, and in some cases, through small business innovation research efforts, we can now bring some small business technology and innovations into the DoD sector, and that's been huge for us. We're now learning things that we've just been missing out on because of that isolation, and with the help of Silicon Slopes and Catalyst Campus, it's been a huge benefit for us, and we're hoping that it'll continue. To be honest, it's great.
Yeah. All right. So Robert, you were in the Marine Corps,
I was.
and now you're not. So, well, once a Marine, always Marine,
Yep.
right? But you were there, and if you had, and it's encouraged to gripe and bitch and moan, right? Mm-hmm. That happens a lot. So it usually ends there, right? Like, but now you're on the other side, and so you know what worked well, what didn't work well, what was a complete dumpster fire. You are now, with your team, in a position to make improvements, right?
Yep. Yeah. So,
how does that work?
So, I actually wish that I could say it was that easy. So 100%, right? We absolutely gripe, bitch, moan, complain in the Marine Corps, and I'm sure the other branches as well. Well, first for us, we were joking earlier, we get all the hand-me-downs, so everything we have is older than everyone else. We make do, we make it work, we're innovative. So the reason I actually got involved with the Air Force was that I was working on a C2 system. I used it in Afghanistan, and when I got out, I found out they were doing it here at Hill Air Force Base. They were sustaining it, and so I ended up coming straight here and helping sustain that weapon system. So it was really cool to come from being a user of a weapon system to now figuring out how to fix security vulnerabilities, issues, deployment processes. We went from physical servers when I was active duty to full virtualization. I'm not on a weapon system anymore, but I'm hoping that we're going down the route of cloud native, Kubernetes-based, rapid CI, continuous deployments, things like that. But the bottom line is there are great efforts right now to try and help modernize some of the problems that I saw in some of these weapon systems, but at the same time, we still struggle. So there are still pockets within the DoD that are very risk averse, and in some cases rightfully so, but these are barriers that we're still actively trying to break down. So unfortunately, I wish it was as easy to say, yeah, I saw this problem, I want to fix it. In some cases, we're able to do that, but we are still struggling to get buy-off from some of our senior leaders. For example, continuous deployment straight to a weapon system. In some cases, that might be really easy. When we're talking about nuclear missiles, maybe we want to stand down for just a little bit and think twice. But that's the challenge that we face, is we don't have those lines necessarily clearly delineated. You're talking about pushing something straight to a weapon system. Well, that could be anything from a nuclear missile to a computer at someone's desk. And so there's just these challenges, these waters that we have to navigate. Unfortunately, we're just not 100% there yet, but we're working towards it.
I do want to say that, so I started in the DoD about 9 years ago now, and when I originally started there, I worked up from F-16 up to working for the General, and we wanted to get off base. We wanted to go and do innovation off base, and I remember banging my head against a wall trying to get that done. And to be on the outside now with an innovation center, seeing the capabilities that are coming to light, seeing the partnership with like Weber State, and the capability I have to interface with our legislators, Silicon Slopes and others, to make sure that we still get after those issues has been really exciting for me. So like the Rosie Network, that's a big deal for me. I mean, to enable military spouses to get IT certs, give them daycare, make sure that they become successful, and then when their spouse PCSs, they can PCS with them. Like removing the barriers, removing daycare barriers. So it's been nice. I mean, I see the movement, and I mean, I come from Waterfall, so I see the movement, especially when we're talking about Kubernetes, containerization, and I see the want to modernize and innovate, and we're so close. We're right there. We just need to keep pushing, and I'm proud. I'm proud to be sitting here with you guys, who are the ones who are pushing from the inside up.
Yeah. So you mentioned weapon systems, right? A weapon system could be a M4 rifle, and that is maintained by the individual soldier or Marine, right? And then it gets a lot more complex. And they are platforms and systems, and a lot of them have electronics and circuits and code. And when you watch cool war movies, whether you like war or not, those are complex systems that ultimately the goal is less casualties. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, so with a weapon system, what would be a good example of the civilian interaction with the military that's easy to understand and can kind of be summarized? Does anyone have a good example of that?
Like a connection to the mission for a civilian? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. So soon we're actually going to show a video. When I worked in F-16, I was very disconnected from what was truly happening with the pilots. Like, our customer is the pilot, but I didn't really understand what something meant when they said, you know, pilots are passing out, they get G-lock, G-induced loss of consciousness, you know, please help us. And it didn't hit me until we actually went to a PMR and a pilot showed a video of a student pilot passing out and then his teachers yelling at him. And that's when it hit me what my connection to that mission was. So if you want to go ahead and play that video.
Fuel recover. Fuel recover. Fuel recover. Fuel recover. Scully, knock it off. Scully 1, knock it off. Scully 2, knock it off. Get yourself back above the floor. Scully, knock it off. Scully 1, knock it off. Scully 2, knock it off. All right, Q, climb back up above 12,000. All right, just
So what happened there is the pilot actually passed out by pulling 9.4 Gs, and then the plane took over once it realized he had passed out, and auto GCAS saved him. So previous to this, the F-16 just became a lawn dart. There was nothing we could
Ground
do.
collision and avoidance system, GCAS.
Yes.
So he's heading to the ground. Everybody
Yes.
watch Top Gun? Has everybody seen Top Gun?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, heading to the ground, and it actually pulls him up and saves his life.
Yep. So I hadn't really had that connection to the mission. I worked for F-16. Software was throwing over my projects over the wall, and one day a pilot comes in and shows me this video, and I kid you not, a full auditorium. People are crying. People are like goosebumps, just in awe that was our connection to the mission. So that's fine.
Yeah.
And we've had multiple saves with this GCAS, and now it's for the commercial world, you have actually traffic collision and avoidance. So that technology now has moved from the military into the commercial sector. And that's why this connection is so important, is that we can do things in the military, try it out, figure it out, and then pass it off to our commercial counterparts.
And that happens a lot, right?
It does. So I was gonna, so I look like a military, I was not military, I've been civilian all my life, but I had 2 opportunities to deploy, both to Iraq and Afghanistan for a year in both cases. And so some of the technology that you have here, just even translating between one language and the next, when I was in Iraq, I had to have a cultural advisor to do that interpretation. So you think about right now what Silicon Slopes is doing with English translation into other languages. That's the type of technology we needed because there was a difference in language itself. And Afghanistan, so when I was there, they used to have UASs, unmanned aerial systems, that would sit and watch us. And I knew that there was technology in the labs, in the research areas, that could actually move that off the top of us so they weren't watching us every day and knowing what we're doing. And so that's the tough part is overseas, we would love to see some of this technology, but it took too long. We'd have to do a contract, do a program of record, do a development, do a whole bunch of testing before it got deployed. And we needed to accelerate that. We needed to get it right out of the lab and get it over to our airmen, our Marines, our sailors, our soldiers, and use it right now because they are in harm's way and you want to give them the best. Make sure it works, give them the best.
I want to really quick, you just reminded me of a challenge that we faced when I was in Afghanistan, actually. We daily, almost, we had special forces that would, so when you're in special forces, you're just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and their real communication with us is to try and set up a little satellite and point to a satellite somewhere and hope that they can get a connection and then get some comms with us. Sometimes they've got other means, but for the most part, that's what they're doing. They're going out there setting up these little tiny satellites. And so our system, our C2 system was what they would use if they needed a medevac or they needed air support or whatever. And so we would get
C2, command and control.
Thank you.
They told us not to use
I was
acronyms.
trying not to use any acronyms, so I actually reworded that whole sentence, and I still failed. No, but we would talk with them daily, trying to help them get on point so that they could connect to our system so that we could provide the service and support that they needed. And you look at what we have today, right? You look at Starlink as a prime example, really straightforward system that can really auto-align, auto-connect to satellites. And so these are the types of things now that we would love to see in the hands of our special forces and other folks that are out traveling. So just another great example of how technology, how it was. I've got another funny story that I won't share about somebody cutting a wire that we could, but how it was and versus how things can be and how we're looking to some of these new innovations to help our teams not have that struggle. Could you imagine being out in the middle of a war zone and you need support and you're sitting here trying to get, this antenna pointed to a satellite and that's your critical need and not being able to do it. Those are the types of things that we want to avoid in the future.
Yeah, and I lost 2 guys the first month I was in Afghanistan, and it was just that case. Guys were going out to a weapons storage area, going to go do an inspection. The Afghan shot at them, killed a couple guys, and then there was a couple guys in that battle space. We couldn't get access to them. If we would have had the right technology, the right communications, some way to go out and inspect what was going on, I think we could have saved at least one of them. So that's the type of technology we need to have, and we need to get out there.
And I think, to be honest, there's a direct correlation between the technology that we launch and innovate on and casualties and more. So as we modernize, as we build out capabilities, deaths go down. We're very pointed, we're very directional. We can avoid situations like that, and that's the importance of modernization.
Yeah. All right, so Thomas, your civilian rank is equivalent to a lieutenant general, correct?
Just a general, baby
Just
general.
Okay.
Baby general.
Brigadier.
BG.
Brigadier. Long time in, you've seen a lot of change and innovation, right? So now as the Director of Engineering and Technical Management, Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, what does that role entail?
Well, so I did not ever intend to become a senior executive. So how I got into this business, I was a poor college student. I needed a job. I was living on the floor of my sister and brother-in-law that were up at Hill Air Force Base, and actually put in a resume and got hired. The guy didn't ask me about computer science or engineering. I had a little reference that said gator wrestler and rattlesnake show person, and that's all he asked me. So I didn't plan to get into this business. But I have now embraced it. Aerospace and defense, and why national security and national defense is so important. So that's kind of been my driving light. And actually, Anissa and I were playing golf the other day, and I said, why did you go back to Catalyst Campus? She said, the dedication to the mission. So I've stayed with this because of, the importance for our nation, for our military members. And so kind of that's my guiding light, is that I want to be proactive warfighter support. I want to do the right things for our military and keep us on the forefront, make sure we're leading everywhere. But how do you do that? I do think we do have some stagnation. And I'll just use Minuteman as my case in point. That weapon system was designed in the 60s and 70s. Phenomenal weapon system. It did what it was supposed to do. Nuclear deterrence, right? It's 24/7, it's protection for the nation. But we kind of let our guard down. So Cold War ends, right? Russia's not a bad guy anymore, and we forgot about it. And now what's happening politically in the world? And so we need to pay attention to that. And so that's the other thing, is that we just keep up. We need to make sure we have these new understanding of what's out there. If we can bring it in, utilize it in the military. And so as the technical director, that's one of the things I do. I just try to see what's out there, see it how it applies, if it makes sense, figure out ways with our innovation base, our Catalyst campus, our Silicon Slopes, our academics. So we've signed now 4 education partnering agreements with schools throughout the state. Weber State, BYU, Utah State, to start thinking about and getting people interested in this aerospace and defense industry. And so that's kind of my, so people, process, and products. We just really need to focus in. That first one is the people is so important, and especially for the next generation.
Yeah. And there's a good example happening right now in Ukraine, right? The innovation, whether it's drones from Best Buy being flown over there and delivered to us and other NATO partners sending sophisticated systems, they'll figure out a way to innovate, right? Whether it's the $10 drones or the $10 million drones. What is your guys' industry learning from watching this over the last 8 months? And how are you going to apply some of those lessons?
So, I mean, I kind of already mentioned it originally, right? Starlink was a great example. We saw firsthand what happened when Russia started jamming Starlink, and they were able to fix it in a matter of hours, right, and be operational. So those are the types of lessons that we're looking at and trying to resolve. I have a kind of a funny story about jamming. When I was deployed, we thought we were under attack one night. They came in, scrambled, got everyone up. All of our radios were jammed, so we assumed, the Afghanis were jamming our stuff. They were getting ready to attack. Turns out someone just left the jammer turned on the MRAP and went to sleep. And so that was just kind of a similar scenario. But at the time, right, we had no idea what it was. We were able to find out. But you look at that's a technique that's deployed everywhere, and it's something that's a very real world scenario, and it's something that we would love to incorporate and figure out. Not only how do we fix the problem, but how do we fix it that fast? They were able to fix that from the States overseas in a matter of hours. Like, it's just incredible when you think about 10, 20 years ago, that would have been impossible. So we're looking at those things.
Well, so I was just surprised with Russia and Ukraine. It kind of, just because we'd been in the Middle East and they kind of understood what we've been doing in the Middle East for the last 30 years, I thought Russia would use a very similar type of technique, and they didn't. So that surprised me, and it was almost World War II-ish, rolling tanks up to the border, using kind of conventional. So I was surprised, and I think that's one of the things that we just got to pay attention to, that we kind of are high tech here in the U.S., right? It may not apply other areas, and I know definitely in Afghanistan and Iraq it wasn't. We were just trying to make sure our communication was there, and we could get stuff out to our troops and that kind of stuff. So I do think we got to pay attention. There is a near peer out there, but we also have to understand what's happening today with Ukraine and Russia, and it was surprising to me. So.
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, watching others, identifying how they're doing business. I mean, you think drones, you think how simple they are. You can go and buy them at Best Buy. The capabilities that come in when it's innovate or die just changes the game. And you see it every day there. So it's watching, it's understanding what's working, what's not working, and improving our capabilities based off of their wartime.
Can I just say, too, what's really cool about what you just mentioned is that the economies of scale aspect. Because the commercial world is coming up with some of these technologies, we can actually now take advantage of that at a much lower cost. Sentinel weapon system, $98 billion weapon system, because we're developing everything it's greenfield from the ground up. But there are some really cool technologies that small businesses and commercial are helping drive down the cost of some of these innovations. That's huge for us. I think when you consider how valuable our tax dollars are, being able to take advantage of things with economies of scale because it's a commercial product, that's a great benefit.
Yeah. Probably for you, Anisa, the Hill Air Force Base, $188 billion life cycle product. That will double the economic growth projected in northern Utah.
Yep.
Talk about
so
that.
There's a huge tech boom happening in northern Utah, and I think we've kind of emphasized on it. We're seeing a huge movement, not only within our buildings at Catalyst campus, but companies just wanting to come and be a part of this amazing opportunity to be on the ground on a green-fielded product, to be able to integrate any technology. And people always look at technology and they think like, oh, my technology doesn't fit what that does. And that's not always true. Like, I've seen it in the DoD where the 75th Medical Group, or doing very manual tasks with their notifying people of appointments. And I'm like, let's automate it. There's like 10 tools, COTS, off the shelf, let's do it. And that's kind of the direction of like how we need to be going. So, and we see it. I mean, we see it every day. Companies coming to us and saying, do you think there's a capability here? And I'm like, absolutely. Whether we know it or not, somewhere in the DoD, because we're on, like our own little town.
Yeah. Last question, then we'll open it up. Get the microphone ready, please, someone. Just correct me where I'm wrong here. The United States of America has the right and privilege to tax its citizens. They use some of that money for the Department of Defense, big budget. They spend money on staying ahead of our adversaries and providing a good service for the troops. There's a lot of civilians involved as well in the budget. The end goal being to have the best, deadliest, safest, whatever it is, technologies. Can't do that alone. Need entrepreneurs and other like-minded folks. And the transfer office, the liaison, whatever we're going to call it, is facilitating that. Correct me wherever I was wrong in that.
Wow, that's a long question. You guys all catch that? So how do we get technology transition from one part to the next? So I believe there's really two thought processes for technology transfer and transition. So before, we had enough investment in the military that we could kind of influence our industrial base. Back in the 60s and 70s, if you actually look, we were a higher percentage, but today we're pretty small. And so I think we've got to change our mindset to be smart consumers of some of these new novel technologies. Now, how do you do that? There's a couple ways. One, with some operators that are actually out in the field, certain technologies make sense, and I call it technology transition to an operator. So we actually give them that. So unmanned vehicle, unmanned systems, some non-destructive evaluation, some comms. Those are technology transition to our operators. But there's a transition to our industry partners. So we don't do this alone. And I talked about 26,000 people, 5-to-1 with our industry. And so there's the Northrops, there's the Boeings, there's the BAEs, there's the Lockheeds. And so it's okay to take some of these small businesses and actually link them up to the big companies that are actually delivering big platforms like air refuelers, the KC-46, the Sentinel. They've got a lot of subcontractors. And so that transfer to industry that we actually buy back is okay too. And so back to this valley of death, a lot of times we want to have something that's already ready, but we have to mature technology. We have to mature manufacturing processes. And so it is a valley of death a lot of times, going from understanding to application. And so we've got to work between us, our industrial partners, and our operators in certain cases to get this transfer and transition to operators. Does that make sense? Two parts, really. And at industrial base, that ecosystem, that national innovation base has to be there. We've learned it in World War I, we learned it in World War II, and I think we're learning it as we go forward here. So we got to have that industrial base counterpart, okay?
So I will say, I did end up going over to Northrop prior to Catalyst Campus and ended up calling a buddy of mine to get me on Platform 1, which is a very cool platform in the DoD, and started working with my counterparts in the DoD. And things were so smooth. It was so easy to strategize and build out a plan together in one tool as opposed to throwing it over a wall. And to this day, even with Catalyst Campus, our mission is to ensure that we're breaking down those walls, that we're integrating the teams early, that when we have small businesses coming and talking to our DoD partners, that they're hearing what the issues are, that they understand how their products can impact our DoD or our programs. So we're trying to remove those barriers. We have innovation events where we have big events like BFE, beverage fueled ecosystem, with soda and beer inclusive. And we just try to talk about what's innovative, what's coming up. We talked about model-based system engineering. What's next for it? Does somebody have like a really good idea, and what is it? And is something working? We're not talking classified, it's unclassified. Just collaboration in general is where we're moving. And that's what is exciting me.
No, I don't really have much to add to that other than you're absolutely right. No, we are, I'm seeing it too. It's really exciting that we're collaborating not only with our primes, with our subs, with small businesses. It's making a huge difference because, and I'm kind of going back to earlier topics, we're learning things, we're learning about technologies that, some of us haven't even thought of. And that's huge when we're talking about developing some of these new weapon systems. Unfortunately with Sentinel, there are some things that we've learned about. It's like, oh gosh, how do we go back and fix this now? We're trying, but it becomes a challenge. Not having known that up front, we're kind of playing catch up in some cases. There's another weapon system that's coming online right now where they are taking the lessons learned from Sentinel. And again, we're learning and learning and learning to hopefully we'll get to the point where we've got such a great model of collaboration, communication with industry and with small businesses that as we stand up new weapon systems, it's not this catch-up, but it's been a great learning experience, and I absolutely see it. We're definitely doing that collaboration. It's huge. It's great.
Very cool. All right, questions?
So I'm glad you mentioned Idaho Falls and Idaho National Lab. That's where I came from, and I've actually worked up there, and I've had family work up there, and a lot of cool things have come out of there. Do you also work with other labs such as Los Alamos? I've got a brother-in-law that's working on the projects where they're upgrading the actual nukes themselves. Do you work down there as well?
Yeah. If I was running you through all the team members, it'd probably take us all afternoon. So we have Sandia. They've done design agents work for us. We've got Los Alamos. I was supposed to go to Lawrence Livermore here in a couple weeks. I've been out to the Kansas City, Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So all great. And for anybody that doesn't know, those are the Department of Energy. And so if you kind of understand how Minuteman was structured, the platform and the delivery system is done by the military, DoD. But the physics package is actually done with our counterparts over in Department of Energy. And so that's why Idaho National Lab's phenomenal partner, Sandia, Los Alamos, all of them are really good partners. In addition, so I'm going to add to this, our federally funded research centers. So think about MITRE, Aerospace, Johns Hopkins University, Applied Physics Lab. They're all on our team. And I know, as a director of engineering and a system guy, I know I'm not smart enough to figure all that stuff out. So I've got to rely on DOE, Department of Energy, and all these federally funded research centers to help us out, because that big a program and as complex as that program, obviously I can't figure it all out. So I see Dr. Nolan over here. I'm hoping, Dr. Nolan, he was a military guy, colonel retired. Now he looks like Santa Claus, but he is going to be helping me out and figuring this out. Santa Claus. But yeah, we're tying all those together, and we have to. It's got to be a whole nation on this project. We're getting concrete from various locations, the border wall. We're actually picking up some of the activities that were done on the border wall, now having to move it up to our states as we kind of deploy this. So it's going to be one of the largest undertakings that military movement we've seen in decades.
So we are a small business named Botex LLC. We are just next door. And we watch very closely for all the requirements that 309 comes up with. So we look at SAM, and we have a couple of other portals that we go to. Now, frankly, to us, CMMC is looking tough, because we want to respond back to sources or notices, but when DoD says you have to be CMMC 2.0 compliant by July 23, that is a deterrent for small businesses. So if it's off topic, I apologize, but if it is on topic, I have this question, I have one more question after this.
Did you guys want to do that? Yeah. So this is a tough question. So we would like to be as open as possible. We would like to be as transparent as possible with everybody, right? And give you as much insight and all that kind of good stuff. But you realize what we're dealing with. Nuclear weapons. This is multi-level security, and it's sensitive. So part of the concern about me even coming down here and talking about this is the sensitivity of that. And so we really have to pay attention. So I know that in our case, there's some sensitivity. But there's other projects in the military, in the research side of the house that I think really make sense. And we try to keep it as unclassified as possible. But once you understand the application, you don't want to give that away. If it gets exfilled from, taken from our networks and provided to our adversaries, we don't get that back. And so I know we put a lot of stringent requirements, but it's intentional, guys. I just don't think if we get it exfilled, it's not coming back to us, okay?
And I think there's other opportunities too. I mean, we have the accelerator we just hosted this year, the first one, 8 companies got contracts. I mean, it doesn't have to be classified. It can be in the unclassified realm and it's showing capability, and then the DoD can invest in that capability depending on the outcome. And if you find there's a need in the DoD. So there's other opportunities. I mean, there's open topic, it's more than just SAM. So
I just want to say that there are other contracts too in small businesses that are trying to help other businesses, get into the industry. So while there is a lot of stringencies and there's a lot of companies just wouldn't even know where to begin navigating those waters, there are companies out there. Catalyst Campus is great too, though, 100%. In helping with this, but there are companies that are also trying to help other companies get into this realm and not necessarily circumvent the rules, but really kind of help them navigate those waters. So those do exist, and we are grateful for those because they're trying to help us collaborate with some of these programs that we normally wouldn't be able to because of some of those restrictions. What we don't want to have happen is go through this whole long process only to find out that we can't use this product or this service. And so that's what we're trying to do right now is get that collaboration ahead of time, and then when we see the value or the need, then we can go through those wickets. So there are efforts happening, but 100% agree with Mr. Lockhart. We are also trying to protect our national security at the same time. So it's a fine line to play.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks for coming down, and great to hear from each of you. And I wanted to make sure I got this correct, so I wrote it down. So Russia's invasion of Ukraine notwithstanding, it's clear that many bad actors are moving to more of an asymmetric approach to conflict and warfare. So understanding that there are things you can't talk about, what can you talk about with regards to what the DoD and industry is doing to help America fight from an asymmetric standpoint?
I can't talk about that one. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, I'm sorry, no.
And this one's a political sensitive subject, and there's people that make a lot more money, are politically in the right spot, sir. I would love to. I can give you a lot of opinions, but from a political standpoint, it's above my pay scale.
Hi, I'm Laura. I did fly in an F-16. I passed out at 8.5. And I was with another pilot and a trainer in Dallas Air Force Base. Anyway, it brought tears to my eye when I saw that, because that was the highlight of my career, I think. My question would be more is, in the realm of contracts, how do we if we're small businesses, get involved and find out what might be out there, whether it's the nuclear or the less riskier arenas?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. Catalyst Campus specifically, we're a nonprofit. We do not take equity or any funds from the companies. We just want them to be successful. So we have an accelerator that brings companies in with their current capabilities to help them identify where in the DoD do they fit. So that's one mechanism. We also have SAM.gov. We have SIBRs, so Small Business Innovation Research. We have open topics. There's a ton of capabilities to get in. Small businesses, like, this is the time. More than any other time, now is the time to integrate into the DoD.
Yeah, and so we try to put, like quarterly, we put subjects together, and so they're just open topics. And so if you think you can relate to that open topic, they're usually open all year long, and you can do that. And then we do, and I'm going to use an acronym, and I don't know what AFWORK stands for, but it's our way, Air Force, and it's the way we actually go after certain subjects. And they help us out from science, technology, small business, innovative. And so they're a group that actually also tries to demystify this small business, contracting and subjects. It can help you out on saying what that open topic means and what they're actually looking for.
And how do we find that information again?
we can probably get you a website that actually shows you exactly what's open today, what's going to be open. They kind of advertise ahead of time. We try to have some dialogue as best we can with the small business to see if it makes sense before you go ahead and put a topic together. Some of those proposals are very expensive, and with a small company, $100,000 is a big check, right? So you want to make sure there's something on the other end that is of interest for the military, the Air Force.
I know we are doing an innovation showcase for Hill Air Force Base, so F-16, F-22, A-10, F-35, GBSD, Sentinel, to kind of demonstrate capabilities from small businesses. I think, so my company actually comes from Colorado Springs, and I want to bring that goodness of what's worked there, here, so we can identify if we want to utilize some of those small businesses. So just get with me after, and I'll give you that information.
You know, we mentioned CMMC, and we recognize the importance of that. But when you go from, you know, if I'm trying to sell you software, the ATO requirements, maybe it's IATT, or the FedRAMP certification, the cost and time, can you, and, you know, Anisa, you know, touched on Platform One. Can you go a little bit further into depth about what's being done to try to reduce the time and cost?
I probably can tackle that. So on another hat, you know, I told you the two hats I have, but I worked the digital campaign at the Air Force level for the last 3 years, and we know that's a problem. I mean, it is painful, especially trying to get, first of all, the software looked at, authorities to connect, and then authorities to operate, and then we ask you to do it reoccurring every year, you know, to update. And you're making changes faster than we can actually get authorization to get you on the network. And so the one gentleman that didn't make it down here, Craig Reese, that's one of his tasks as part of the campaign, is to figure out a streamlined process and get it so we can actually use it across the enterprise, because we're doing it one-off by base. So we've got 70-plus bases out there, and I can go to one base and I can use the software, and then I can go just down the street, you know, 3 miles and go to another base, and I can't. And so we're trying to, once you get that authorization to operate, and that we can actually use it across the enterprise and on multiple platforms. Back to the cloud. If we get the cloud right, I think that's going to save us a lot of time, because we are doing it base by base, location by location, and AO by AO, and that's too hard on you as an industry. I mean, I'd get frustrated if you just had one AO. Now you have 70 AOs to get it approved. That's wrong.
Sorry, I'm super stoked about this one. Sorry. So,
Great question.
Great question. Actually, it kills me to see when we go in with a small business and their capability gets stuck at the ATO, the RMF level, and it doesn't get to the
Risk management framework.
Sorry.
So we do acronyms.
ATO, authority to operate.
Authority to
Yeah.
connect, ATC.
But if we aren't getting capability to the warfighter, we're failing. So we've been working with the 309th and a couple of other groups to build an immersive environment where we can take software that's completely agnostic of DoD, break the dependencies, put guardrails on it like it would be in the DoD, so you can test in, test out that functionality, and then eventually build out that pipeline. But even just testing to make sure that whatever platform you're going to, whatever environment you're going to, it's going to work. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I'll just have this library called, and no, it's going to be enclosed. It needs to be like ready to go in a box, and that's how it goes. But we are trying to tackle that. I mean, slowly but surely. I think we've gotten a lot of traction in the last 2 months. So, yeah.
And
Yeah, so-
we're also putting on your contract, so just think about where you get your software, because you're going out to open libraries and picking things up, and you're combining it together. And for a Department of Defense, we worry about that, because we've had a couple of cases where things slipped in that shouldn't be there, and then we have to go through our whole network and cleanse it, right? That's not right. So I'm going to challenge the industry is also to understand where their software came from, and especially when you're going out there and grabbing open source libraries.
I want to add to that. So with that immersive environment, I'm sorry, deciding. It's.
I know Anissa plays better golf. She's got the
God.
right answer, so she'll give you the right
I
answer.
like golf. But yeah, no, 100%. It's 100% on what you're saying. But to be able to build out a system that would do all of the static analysis and everything we need so you can mitigate and make sure that your software is going to be successful, that should be in that immersive environment. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to replicate as fast, even if we can better, as fast as the DoD to make sure that we can provide that to the small businesses, because that is a huge fail. It's what you need to do. You need to mitigate every single thing prior to getting to a point where you can deploy to a DoD environment.
Yeah, so finally, no. No, now it's going to fall short. So, so we are absolutely partnering with Catalyst Campus and other SIBRs, one of which is, Game Warden is doing some really cool stuff with continuous interim authority to test with small business, with software that we would normally have to go through this whole FedRAMP or whatever process to test out. But there's that aspect of it, and then we're also looking at things like software bills and materials to figure out how we can catalog and understand what's inside your source code so that once we do get things vetted, to Mr. Lockhart's point, it's now much easier for reciprocity because we know exactly what your software is made up of, exactly what libraries are doing, who committed code. So there's a couple of things that we're doing, trying to get an environment where we can spin up a continuous interim authority to test, and then from there, once we've got the software tested, then we can go through the process of, okay, we know this is a need, this meets the mark, let's get it into our space, so that you're not going through this effort, time, money, to develop something that, again, that I said earlier, that maybe we don't need. We are absolutely trying to do whatever we can to take advantage of these small businesses before we go through this long, lengthy ATO process.
And kind of the nice thing, so I'm glad you brought up Game Warden. So Game Warden, you have Defense Unicorns, you have all of these companies who are led by people who left the DoD and are trying to resolve an issue they saw. So these are the champions of what's next. So it's really exciting to work with them, to interface with them, and then see where we're going. But just know that we've got the best on it.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. Yep.
Can I challenge you? So now that we're down here in Silicon Slopes, you're ahead of us in cloud-based computing. And we're trying to figure it out. And so I would challenge any of the groups here, how do we do it better? How do we do it with, you call it information levels, but multi-level security? How do we make it distributed? You know, COVID I thought was bad, but one thing it did for the military, it made us distributed. We actually have to work any place, any location. And so we're thinking through this, but we don't have the answers. And on the campaign, after 3 years, everybody keeps looking at me because I said I'm going to define what an integrated digital environment is. I call it Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy. I have not figured it out, but I do think you here in South Salt Lake and Silicon Slopes are way ahead of us, and we need your help to do that. And so I'll just challenge you there. Multi-level security, cloud-based, distributed environments, and another acronym, ZTN, Zero Trust Network. So how do we get trust the person that's actually on there?
Definitely need a hashtag that.
There you go. All right, and you guys are fine sticking around for a few minutes. I think there's a lot of questions out there. Thank you so much, you three, for joining. This has been fun and enlightening. America's pretty awesome. Really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thanks.
Thank you.